Hello, James.
Hi, Mark. How's it going?
Hello. For all the listeners there, I'm speaking to James Sweetman. James is the guest today, and James is, well, let me read out his bio because I want to make sure I get 100% right. James is an author and motivational speaker and a business coach. He's also a thought leader, and from actually watching him speak is a massively engaging and very humorous storyteller. James has got over 20 years in business and he's held over several senior positions in a number of blue chip companies. He's also a certified NLP practitioner, and he's written some very successful books, Soar and How to Excel at Interviews, to name but a few. James would be seen as a leader within authentic leadership, personal branding, communication, and a whole lot more. James, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Mark, and I'm really delighted to contribute because I've gotten a lot from some of your previous interviews and podcasts as well. So delighted to speak with you.
Thank you very much. And probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I seen James speak, and he had 15 minutes speaking at the All Ireland Business Summit. And you got across the point in a very good way, but you're also very funny as well. You had an awful lot of people laughing, but laughing in a good way. Because you're
laughing with me, not at me.
They were laughing with you. But the content was very, very good. At the time, it was kind of about personal development and branding, and kind of come across the best possible version of yourself. And it also kind of gave some good examples of where people might drop the ball around their kind of identity and branding, and how to actually make sure that you kind of keep track of those kind of moments of truth as well. So, James, would you mind giving the listeners a bit of an overview about your journey to now and a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Gosh, it's an interesting one, Mark, because I'm well used to speaking about topics, but I'm probably less used to speaking about myself. So here it goes. I think, as you said at the outset, my role now is that of an executive coach, business coach, life coach. Sometimes there's different labels people put on it. About half of my work now is working individually with people in a coaching capacity. Half of that is probably interview skills coaching, which is an area that grew organically for me over the last few years. The other part of coaching, and again, it's become more of a niche for me, would be career fulfillment coaching. So a lot of people who are either feeling a little lost, a little stuck in career transition, or even people who feel they have all the trappings of success and achievement, but they don't feel as fulfilled as they could. They would be the areas that I would work with people on most frequently. And then, as you had said as well, I also do group workshops under the broad heading of soft skills, which of course is often the really hard skills. And the other element of my work then, like where we connected in Crow Park a few weeks back, is conference talks. And a growing part of my business as well, reflecting the modern side of things, is media production. So I've been writing a blog since 2005, and there's the articles I write for, and there's been 5 books in the intervening years. So I'm a busy boy, that's what I'm
full on.
But if we look at my story, I think a phrase I often use is, and I think it's paraphrasing Stephen Covey, is, in the first 10, 12 years of my career, I climbed a career ladder, so at age 30, I was working in financial services, and I was managing a team of 80 people.
Wow.
And by all definitions of success, I had a successful career. Looking back on it now, I have some of the language that would say to me maybe I had a bit of a third life crisis, because I sort of forgotten what was important to me. In coaching terminology, we might use the term values. The things that were important to me were not being exercised on a daily basis, and I just felt off. And is often the case as well when things are not right. Dis-ease kicks in, so I was unwell, and I'm generally a healthy person. But this is going back to the year 2000, and as I say, to paraphrase Stephen Covey, I climbed a career ladder only to realize it was against the wrong building. But sometimes you have to climb up so that from that higher elevation you can see more clearly what's going on around you.
Yeah.
And I did back then what many people do at age 20 or 22 now. I took a bit of a gap year, Mark, and I went off traveling, and I had a round the world ticket from Trail Finders, and I was fortunate, having worked for a while, that I wasn't doing it quite like a backpacker. I had a bit of money in my back pocket, and that was probably one of the most pivotal decisions of my life, is taking time to step out. And when I was in Manly, Australia, of all places, I came across my very first coaching book, Be Your Own Life Coach by Fiona Harold. And not only was it useful for me at the time to gather my thoughts around, what I wanted, how I wanted to be in the world, as it were, not just what it is I wanted to do, but the content of the book spoke to me as well, because so much of what was in it was stuff that I had been doing instinctively for years. And
Sure.
I'm sure you've come across the Steve Jobs Stanford address going back to 2005, where he says, looking backwards, you can join the dots. But that was one of my big dots. That's where I came across coaching, but it put a label on something I'd been doing for a while. So it took me to go to Australia to sort of find out what the next step was for me, and that's what 15 years ago now.
I think, and again, I've been working in the recruitment industry for 10 years or so, and you work with people every day who are looking for a new role, and they're looking to change their lives, and so many of them are paralyzed by fear that they won't actually make that change. They end up doing roles that they don't necessarily like doing. They don't give them energy or passion to come to work every day. So what you did was very brave, because obviously you got into a certain position. Sometimes you can get into a level where you've got golden handcuffs, where you're getting some good pay, you're getting the prestige of that senior position, and suddenly if you stop doing it, you might question yourself, well, who am I now if I'm not this person that I'm doing what I'm doing?
Yeah, that is so true. So true. And I still see it all the time. And maybe that's why I do career fulfillment coaching, because it's a path I've walked myself, and fear has a big role to play in it. Absolutely. A lot of people will say, they don't have the confidence to do it. When I work with people in the area of confidence, though, I often say confidence is the byproduct. What gets you there is courage, and maybe I had the courage to make some hard decisions. To some extent, I often use the phrase of, you have to walk through the ring of fire to some extent. You have to let go of stuff that's no longer serving you. Now, some of that could come from the old Bible quote of, camel through an eye of a needle or whatever. It's like sometimes we have to let go of stuff that's no longer serving us. And mostly that's to do with certain beliefs we have or assumptions that we have. And we associate that with our sense of identity. And I think it's particularly a male thing as well. I found that's a generalism, but I'll own it. That we identify who we are with what we do.
Yeah.
And I had people back then when I stepped out of the corporate world, Mark, saying, James, you must be mad. Look what they're turning down.
Yeah.
And even back then, I was in a very fortunate position in that, the company that I was working for, they asked me to define my own role description, so I could determine what projects I wanted to do, etc. And I was doing that, but I still wasn't feeling fulfilled. And there was something else that was calling me. And I didn't know what it was at the time. But for me, the underlying theme that ran through it, though, and it still runs through the work that I do, is that of trust.
Right.
Trust that things will work out. I'm a great fan of that Rumi quote, the 13th century Chinese philosopher. The universe is tilted in your favor.
Yeah. And sometimes you can make those decisions, and on the short term, they don't look like they're necessarily going to pay off. But part of that's just the journey to get to the goal, just maybe a longer way of going around it.
For sure. I'm a great believer, Mark, in the concept of our inner GPS, and that's our emotions. Our emotions will be our warning signals. So often I'll work with people and they'll say to me, I'm feeling stuck, or, I don't feel like myself, or, there's just something missing. It's their emotions that are speaking to them, because as intelligent people, we can argue anything, we can argue the logic of anything. But it links in with where I often do work as well, is around modern definitions of success and what does success mean to you? Because the old way of measuring success was the old Malcolm Forbes quote of he who has the most toys wins. But that's not where success is at anymore. It's to do with emotional success. It's to do with fulfillment. It's to do with having a sense of meaning or purpose in the world. And that also brings us into the territory of authentic leadership as well. So it's being authentic in your own life.
I believe, and I really, really relate to that, because I had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with Jack Canfield in January, and he spoke about living a life with congruency, where everything that you're doing day to day, you're got towards a goal that actually really your whole body and your mind is working towards, rather than your heart is somewhere else as well. I genuinely think that's so important. Whatever you do,
I love that.
You have to have passion towards that as well. So you came back, I'm guessing you came back from Oz. Did you have a kind of a plan then on what you wanted to do, how you wanted to build it up?
I had a sense of a direction, and it's interesting because the phrase I often use now when I'm working with people is knowing what your North Star is. So if you think of like a North Star, like the way sailors years ago used to navigate by it, you don't actually reach it, but it's something there in the sky that you navigate by, that you move towards, that there's a pull towards. You still have to deal with the daily winds and cross currents and the daily practicalities, but I knew where I wanted to go, and I wanted to move into the realm of coaching and personal development, because as I say, looking back, that was the stuff I was doing most naturally anyway. As a teenager, Mark, I would be ripping 10 tips for time management out of magazines and keeping them in a folder. Or back in the mid-90s when I did my MBA, I could have done my thesis on anything, and I chose the topic of motivation, and all of that was evidence that this was my path, as it were.
And fair play to you, by the way, getting a first class honours in that as well. My thesis was I was on course for my first class honours, and that my thesis took me down. So well done on the thesis. I found that genuinely very hard to do.
But what was fascinating in that era, that's 20 years ago, scarily, the tutor that I had, she was excellent. She was a visiting tutor in DCU, and I credit my writing ability really to that particular lady, because she used to rip my stuff apart, but she taught me the discipline of editing. And then of course, academic writing is different than the books I write now. But it's that's where the skill of it was developed, and I suppose a lot of people would say, Mark, and I'm sure you've heard this plenty, that a lot of people think they have a book in them, or that they have a story to tell. One of the things when I came back from Oz as well was I began to write more seriously, because, like say, I've kept a diary, a daily entry diary, since the 1st of January 1986.
Wow!
So that's 30 odd years ago.
Do you review it?
I don't, and it's there for posterity or for a biographer or whatever. If I look back on it, I probably couldn't read my writing, because it's written last thing at night, and it's probably like spiders across a page. But every day since the 1st of January 86. But I've always been the sort of person that I will write things out, and that's RIGHT as well as WRITE. And that has found its way into the many articles in the magazines I write for, and blog, and of course the books as well. And I think, I suppose at my heart, what I am maybe is a communicator, and it's both the speaking realm and the writing realm. It's the different media for communicating the message.
I can relate to write things out. So before I go to bed, I write down 10 things that happened in the day, either positive, negative, or I've learned from. And then in the morning, I'll write down 3 positive things that happened the day before. So I've got like a journal now that's got 3,400 things written in it since April 2013. So I kept that after watching a TED Talk. But I reviewed it after I got to 3,000 entries into it. And it took me 4.5 hours to review it. But I started to see a recipe in some of the things that made me happy, that made me anxious, that I really enjoyed doing, that made me feel courage, that actually made me feel fear. And I actually started to pinpoint certain things that I actually acknowledged them to be. So I put it in a blog as well. So that was actually quite successful in terms of people got a lot out of that. But I definitely... It really is, because it allows me just to kind of pinpoint what's interesting to me, or how I can actually learn better. And what I've learned is I learn best through being kinetic, through doing. So you can read all the theory in the world, but unless I'm actually writing or doing, I won't really get it. Practice, take it down into consideration. That
we started this year is the gratitude bucket. So in addition to the diary, last thing at night, there's a post-it note written with one thing I'm grateful for that day. Brilliant. And that's been going since the 1st of Jan. So I'll probably review that between Christmas and New Year next year, and that'll be or at the end of this year, and that'll be a real gift as well, I think. And it's a nice way to put your head on the pillow at night time as well, a place of gratitude.
But also when you get the low points in your life, that something happens that will actually knock you for six, that it's good to go back and actually reflect on them. Because sometimes you can forget about some of the big challenges that you've overcame because you've done them, because your mind kind of blocks them out, right? So it's important to look at that as well.
It's balance. That's a very valid point, because if we were touching on confidence there a little while ago, one of the tips I often share with people around confidence is, look at those moments in the past, or go through, your memory Rolodex for those scenarios in the past where you felt nervous, challenged, worried, anxious, but you stepped up or you stepped forward anyway, and you've connected with those inner reserves of resilience or determination, courage, or whatever it is, and it's like it's using that positive memory bank in a way that supports you. And it also balances that tendency we have to do excessive worrying, where we're thinking about the worst case outcome.
Exactly. One of the advice I used to offer my candidates when they were going for an interview, if they were kind of dropping in confidence, is I'd say, go and find 5 people and ask them to write one nice thing about you, to hand it to you and read those 5 nice things before you do the interview. And it kind of perks you up, these little kind of things, because sometimes people can over worry in certain situations that they don't need to be. And one thing that keeps ringing through in my head is the statement that you are enough. You just need to actually say it, that you are enough, because ultimately you either can or you can't, and it's determined from your mind, and the confidence comes from that courage, as you said as well.
Yeah, and I think in that area, I say it all the time when I'm working with people on interview skills. It's not just the doing side of it; it's the being side of it, and it's how we show up, and it's state management and all of that. And if we look at what worry is part of our natural defense mechanism. It's like, is that car coming quicker than I think? You're looking ahead and making judgments or assessments. But I often think in that area, let's just make sure it's balanced. So worry is thinking about the worst case outcome. Why not for a moment just think about the best case outcome? And at least it's a moment of contrast. There's a simple, and this is a nice tip for viewers here as well. If there's something you're worried or nervous about, it's like, yes, let me acknowledge it. What am I fearful of here? Because let's remember, worry is the polite way of describing fear.
Yes.
Tony Robbins would say, stress is the polite way of describing suffering.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes if we come up with the strongest word for it, we know exactly what we're dealing with. But what's the worst case outcome? What's the best outcome?
Yeah.
So we're flipping the coin, as it were. And then what's likely to happen? Because that'll at least be somewhere between the two. And it's an immediate quick tip, that one.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good tip. And probably how I'd back that up would be, when you're thinking positive thinking, is obviously thinking about things that go well. You're not overly thinking about things that can't. But positive thinking is also going in on the mindset of, well, what are all the things that can go wrong? And then systematically going through as many of them that you can change or control, and preparing for them, and the other things that you can't, just letting them be. Because outside of that, you can't control the outcomes of them anyway. So positive thinking can be very much a case of manage what you can, be aware of the risks or the concerns, but then just crack on and just do what you can with best information that you have.
It's controlling the controllables, Mark. That's what it is. It's controlling the controllables, and we cannot control what other people say or do, but we have absolute control over how we show up, including our attitude, and we have absolute control over how we choose to respond to what goes on around us.
Yes.
And that's where freedom is found, in the gap between stimulus and response. And it's easy to say it, but I think it takes a lifetime to work on it and to stay curious with it. I teach that stuff every day of the week, and I'm still working on it. But
of course.
That's part of evolution.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing is to offer advice to people. But then the hardest thing is to actually take your advice in those moments.
Oh, take your own medicine. Doctor, heal thyself. You're really coaching yourself. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So can you give me a bit of an overview about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, or how your kind of month really kind of maps out then?
Sure. It's I'm very fortunate in that I'm very busy. So one of the areas that I have to purposely work on is ensuring that I'm doing appropriate levels of self-care as well. Because I like using that analogy of putting the oxygen mask on first. I my oxygen mask is on. And it's interesting, you know, only this week really I've taken some actions to ensure that I'm getting back to the gym first thing in the morning, that I'm factoring in what I would label quiet time, or other people label it meditation, and I try to get all that done by 9 o'clock, so I'm set up for. I find when I'm doing that, I'm being the best of myself.
Yes.
Sometimes if I'm, you know, if that's sacrificed, often for the benefit of others, but if that's sacrificed, eventually I reach the point where I'm running on empty, and that serves no one, you know. So that's an ongoing thing for me. But typically over a week, I would probably have 3 or 4 one-to-one clients, and generally with one-to-one clients, it's 2 or 3 hour sessions agreed upon in advance. And some of that will be career fulfillment stuff, some of that will be interview skills coaching. There's usually a day or a day and a half in there of workshops or group work, and then the rest is meetings, setup, admin, media production. You know, I could work all day, 7 days a week. But for me, it's always finding the right balance between what's busy, what's income generating busy, what's short term, what's medium term, what's the difference between what's urgent and what's important.
Yes.
And that stuff is a dance, you know. But as someone who also, you know, works with groups on organizational skills and time management, I'm a great fan of the concept of batching as well. So right. I'll segment similar tasks together for efficiency. And the old cliche, and I think I spoke about this from the stage when we met there a few weeks ago, you know, it is about working smarter as well. And working smarter is such a cliche, but working smarter is really around knowing what you're saying no to as well.
Yes.
And what you're going to drop, because that's where the time inefficiencies are found.
And you're going to have to say no to certain things, right? And you might necessarily want to say no to them, but you're going to have to. One thing that did come across my mind, and is big thing, is the amount of information that's out there nowadays. Now, the different notifications on your phone, the minute you're waking up, you're getting emails, that one important thing that you're looking to achieve could be gone within minutes, depending on if some type of internal fire, external fire that happens within that as well. Are you finding that working with your customers now, day to day, that they're finding it hard to kind of stay kind of focused on the prize at hand and kind of clarity in their lives?
Yeah, I think there's so much in that area, Mark. In the past, it was about multitasking, and it is about having, you know, several irons in the fire at one time, and, you know, you've many balls in the air. We can use different analogies with it. And it's about, you know, knowing where your time is best spent with them. Social media and technology has fueled that. So we're nearly into the stage of, and I think we can all relate to this, continuous partial attention. Yeah. So not multitasking. It's like, you know, I'm looking at TV at night and the phone is in my hand. You know, it's like we're constantly stimulated, and there's a huge amount of noise. And from a media perspective, it's never been easier to be visible, but nowadays it's almost about getting findable within the noise. You know, so how will people find you if you're looking to grow your business or whatever? One of the common themes that comes up again and again, both for myself personally and for people that I work with, and I work with, say, a lot of senior executives as well, it's around having thinking time or quiet time, or times where you can look inwards for the wisdom rather than for the knowledge that is out there. You know, there's a difference between wisdom and knowledge. So it's balancing what I want, what I know to be true, versus what I'm bombarded with every day.
I'm a big fan of Ting Time. So I remember Keith Cunningham talked about Ting Time, and actually the process where you just take a step back, don't need to make a decision straight away, reflect on it, and actually think, is that the best decision I need to make, or actually, am I asking the right questions?
Questions are the answer for sure.
When you actually write out some questions, but then you actually pose those questions back to yourself, suddenly you can find yourself on a completely different journey than you were doing it before.
It's a direction. I mean, my book Soar, you know, which I wrote a few years ago, my main coaching book, that's really full of questions. You know, I often say, in my business as a coach, you know, questions are the tools of my trade, because I would operate from a place of the people I'm working with. You know, they're the experts on being themselves. You know, no one knows you better than you know you. Yeah. But sometimes a few different questions can open up your awareness. It can take your thinking somewhere else. And in that area, there's maybe two or three questions, Mark, that I go back to again and again. And I think your viewers would be interested in these. And building on what Keith Cunningham there said, coaching question 101 is, what do you want? What do you want? It's a simple but such a powerful question. So say even if you're having a busy afternoon and you're being pulled left, right and center, in that moment, ask it, what do I want?
Yeah, good question. What do you want?
There's an extension of that then, which is, what does success look like to me here?
Yeah, it's a good one.
So if you're trying, you've several projects on the go, you're trying to find a more equitable work-life balance, whatever the scenario is where you feel challenged, you have to have a sense of the North Star, as it were, or, what does success look like to me, or what am I trying to achieve? Otherwise, how will you know you're on the right track unless you have an indication as to what the destination is?
100%. You don't want to be running the wrong way.
Yeah, now your emotions will often guide you, and sometimes I'll use a twin track approach on this. So it's a bit like, what do I want? What does success look like to me? But then on the other side of it, we can look at, what am I looking to avoid here?
Yeah.
Because that brings fear into it, which we spoke about a while ago. But sometimes where there is maybe a no obvious win in something, or no obvious definition of success, what you're looking for is to avoid the worst consequence or the biggest risk. So what am I looking to avoid here will help me move forward. And
that question is actually, I think, is particularly important, because your whole body and your mind, and this comes back to the evolution of how our species has grown, is that we will do anything to avoid pain. And avoiding pain is a lot more enticing than actually pleasure. So we're kind of driven then by kind of pain or pleasure, but the vast majority of us will avoid the pain. So
and you only have to look at the recent American election. People are motivated. The number one motivational drive is the drive to avoid pain, embarrassment, and humiliation.
Yeah.
So we will never purposely put ourselves into a scenario where we will feel hurt physically, emotionally, mentally. And sometimes it's the lesser of two evils. There, it's the pain of toothache versus the visualized pain of going to the dentist and the needle. What's the two evils? There's a third question that I think viewers will find useful as well as a great guiding question, and it's one, Mark, that goes back to we're the experts on being ourselves, and it's one that gets straight to the inner wisdom away from the noise that's around us. And that question is, what decision, action, response on my part would make me feel most proud about myself?
Okay, say that again.
What decision, what action, what response on my part would make me feel most proud about myself?
Yeah.
So what we're doing there is we're using the filter of pride, of being proud of ourselves, which is the opposite of self-betrayal, which is the toughest betrayal to ever swallow. Yeah. We're using the opposite of betrayal, so pride, as a way of guiding us towards certain actions or decisions. So say a little example on this one. I remember doing a talk a few weeks ago, and there was a lady at the end of the talk put up her hand, and she said, James, I've witnessed someone being bullied at work. What should I do? And I said, well, I can't answer that. I don't know the ins and outs of it, and it wasn't relevant necessarily to the topic we were speaking on either. But I said, the lady asked the question, let me give her something back. So I gave her that question.
Yeah.
I said, what decision on your part or action on your part would make you feel most proud about yourself? And she took 1 or 2 moments to reflect on it. And then you could just see her eyes open up. She said, I know what to do. And she didn't need to share it with us. But that question helped her connect with her own inner wisdom. So she would feel when her head would go on the pillow at night time that was the best choice available to her.
Yeah. They're three good questions. And I sound like a broken record because I've said this the last 6 or 7 podcasts. But I think the start of the year is really the moment where I was seeing that geniuses ask great questions. And for so many, I had this Superman mindset where I needed to actually try to answer all these different questions, where if I couldn't answer the questions, there was something up. But just posing the right questions, maybe having other people answer them, is just a better place to be as well. And I think when I think about fear and I think about when I don't want to do something, I always push it back to say, what if I had the courage to do this? Mm-hmm. What would that look like? and then I say, okay, I'm going to be that person now, and I try to move in that situation. Or another way I need to look at it is, imagine if you met the person that you could have been for a few moments, and then that gives me a bit of a tingle down my spine. And like, right,
it's that one, Mark, because that was the premise of my book, the first novel I wrote, The Odyssey of Abraham Little.
Oh wow!
Where, you know, I can't, was it a George Bernard Shaw quote? I might be wrong on that, but it's like, you know, hell is meeting the person you could have been. So that's in that area that you were speaking about.
Yeah, and that
the other bit to do with fear, and there's a few flippant acronyms I use with fear. You know, a lot of the time it's false evidence appearing real.
Yes.
It can be forget everything and run, which is a humorous one.
Yeah.
Although the one that speaks most to me, FEAR, face everything and rise. You know, so you're facing it, and you're working through it.
And that's definitely a positive spin, because I've heard the other two before, but I like the third one as well, where it's kind of, we actually turn that into a positive side. And I feel that so many people nowadays are driven by fear, because they're getting it from all different news sources, notifications. Obviously, that's what clickbait is used. If it's something negative, people click into it because we're information gatherers as well, which is quite sad, because it means that some people won't be able to realize their dreams because they're stuck in that element of fear as well.
Here, it pops into my mind. You mightn't see this because it'll be reversed.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's readable.
Oh, I can see it. I'm selfish enough. I'm selfish enough to want to feel good. Yeah. Well, it starts with yourself, right? So that's important.
That is a card that I came across somewhere. I think I swiped it from the deck and I kept it. And I suppose it goes back to putting your own oxygen mask on first. But I value myself enough not to be sold how I should be feeling by news editors.
Yeah,
and that's putting it very bluntly. So I stay informed, Mark. You know, I stay up to date with news and what's happening in current affairs, but I am very clear in terms of what I allow in and what I digest and how something impacts on me.
I think that's very important.
If we think about news media, for example, you know, that's a prism of concentrated negativity.
Yeah, I agree.
And I just value myself too much to be bombarded by that. I think our reality, I mean, social media and technology has given us all worldviews, you know, which has so many positives to it. But the flip side of it is that we are bombarded by the negative world events as well.
Yeah.
And I think if we look at maybe just recalibrating where our focus needs to be, you know, our immediate reality is what's going on outside our front doors. You know, not only is that what impacts us more, but it's also where we have a sense of control or input. Yeah. So if we go back to controlling the controllables, it's like, it's my circle of influence. You know, it's what's going on around me. It's not what's happening in North Korea.
Yeah, and I think that is so important that you mentioned it. It is important to be informed, right? So that is key, that you're informed what's going on. But the book stops at us about what we let into our lives, what we actually view, what we focus on, because the words that we read, the words that we use, our whole mentality can be built up by other people's agendas. So it is important to control that.
If you think about, you know, the people who are employed by certain media companies, and their sole job is to get your attention.
Exactly, and I think that's like
to get your attention.
I think some of the notifications that you get on your phones, like Instagram or Facebook, whatever it might be, they've got hundreds, and in some cases thousands, just to keep you going on to your notifications even more. And one of the advice that I got from Chris Flack quite recent at the conference was, he said, turn off your notifications. Literally turn them off, and be focused on how much you're on your phone or social media. And it was a really good piece of advice there. And
but it's habit after a while. We don't even realize. Of course,
exactly.
Memory, all of that.
So we've got some really good advice there, James, which is fantastic. So just coming up to near the end of the interview, and so I usually ask this question, what do you know now that you wish you knew back then? But I kind of like asking this question now is, if you had the opportunity to go for, I don't know, coffee, tea, beer with your younger self, let's say 18, 21, and you had 5 minutes with that younger person, what advice would you offer them?
Gosh, that's a good question. That's a good question, Mark. I'd love to sit down with him. I'd love to sit down with the younger James for sure. I think he would be amazed at the life I have now to start with, because I couldn't have predicted it. You know, back then, Mark, you know, all I knew I wanted to do was I wanted to work in an office. That's all. That's what my goal was. I wanted to work in an office.
Yeah.
Way back then as well, you know, as a child, if someone asked me what did I want to be when I grew up, I would say teacher. Now, I'm not a teacher in the traditional sense of the word, but I do stand in front of groups and I share knowledge, you know. So
educate.
He was fairly well, clued in back then. I suppose I've been fortunate in that I've always been a fairly resilient person.
Right.
And I've always had a very strong work ethic, which I got from my parents. And the 18-year-old me was eager to get out of school and to start to make a mark in the world, and made the best choices that he could at the time. Of course, I would always say we're always doing our best, but sometimes with hindsight we can see there was other choices available to us.
Of course.
The younger me, when he started off in his career, loved his work, like loved working in financial services, loved studying, loved climbing the career ladder, and then leaped from it, you know, at age 30.
Yeah.
I think if I was to, it was to give the advice back there to that 30-year-old me was, it was absolutely the right decision. You know, that's one of the top 2 decisions I made in my life, was to step out of the corporate world and to take a chance on following my heart's desire, for want of a better phrase. And sometimes we forget that we will never lose our employability skills, Mark. You know, I think I'd always be employable. You have those transferable competencies, as it were. And as I came across recently as well, and it was something that just resonated with me. It's like, you can get no's that cost you nothing. So like you can ask, ask and you shall receive. Sometimes you'll ask and you won't receive. Yeah. And you might have learned something. But maybe the only failure is not asking in the first place.
Yeah.
And that brings me back to the whole concept of trust. I think the key bit that I would give back to my 18-year-old self was continue to trust in yourself, because that goes to the heart of what confidence is anyway.
Yes.
You know, from the Latin word confidus, meaning with faith, self-confidence, with faith in self. You know, continue to trust in yourself and continue to trust that things will work out. And if they haven't worked out, you know that old phrase, things will always work out in the end. If they've not worked out, it's not the end yet. Things will continue to work out. And there's that great quote, I can't remember whose it is, and it sits with me and my definition of spirituality as well. You know, that God has bigger dreams for you than you can dream for yourself. And I often say, by God, do I have some big dreams for me?
Yeah.
To start with. But there's always something more there. And that's the fun bit. That's the fun bit. Life would be boring if you knew everything.
Yeah.
You know? The fun bit is let me set my course, the North Star. Let me have an idea as to what I'm moving towards, because that lights me up. But let me be open to what can evolve there as well.
Yeah.
And that, as I say, is the fun part of it. That is what life is, as I see it.
It's really good advice. So, James, how can people reach out and contact you and follow you?
Sure. Probably the mothership, Mark, is the website, jamessweetman.com. That was redone last year, so there's lots of free resources in there. There is plenty of free ebooks. There's one great one for upgrading your life. So it has 5 or 6 key nuggets in it where you apply them, and you can apply them to different aspects of your life, work or personal life. There's also a new one that's gone in recently around how to grow your business, how to add more value in your business. So the mothership is jamessweetman.com. You also find me on the main social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. I do Facebook Live events every month. And there's that also advertises some of the other events that I do throughout the year as well.
Brilliant.
That I do.
James, thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it. So hopefully today you've got some massive nuggets there that you can go back and actually apply to your life as well. Today's guest